Okay, everyone, it is Wednesday, April 1st, and we are continuing with Chapter 2 of Echo. You have your questions out with you. I hope you answered the few from yesterday. And we're going to be looking at the ones for today. There's a couple more on the paper I sent you yesterday, and I sent you another one this morning, and we're going to answer the first one on that page also. Okay, let's start reading. Pennyweather sent for them on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Mike and Frankie waited in the visitation room connected to her office. The draperies had been pulled open wide so the sunlight streamed in, making everything look bright and cheerful. Centered in the room was a long table with benches on either side. A bowl of shiny apples and a vase of flowers had been positioned just so. Pennyweather always liked to put on a good show. The office door was open and Mike could hear her talking on the phone. Musical instruments? Yes, we have a piano. There are several boys here who could. Of course I'd consider. Yes, you could hear it played. It's an upright, very good quality. That would be fine. A week from today at 1 o'clock. And if you like what you hear, you can arrange to take... Yes, goodbye. Mike winced. Pennyweather was selling the piano? The broken down upright in the dining hall was out of tune from years of boys pounding on it. One of the pedals was broken. Even so, it was still playable. His first day at Bishop's, Mike had wolfed his food at every meal and then scooted over to play. Pennyweather quickly put an end to that, saying she didn't need more noise during meals with the dishes rattling and all the boys yapping. Mike had found a way around it. After the boys were excused from dinner, Pennyweather left. He hung back to scrape food off the plates and stack them for the cooks and whoever was on dish duty. If he was fast about it, he had a half hour or more at the keyboard before he had to be back in the dorm. Sometimes Frankie stayed and played duets with him. At first, the boys in the kitchen threw bread scraps at them until they heard Mike's and Frankie's talent. Now they made requests. Even in the piano's sorry condition, Mike hated to see it go. Then again, if they were fostered out, it wouldn't make any difference. Pennyweather walked into the visitation room. Frankie ran to Mike and clung to his arm. She stood in front of them in her navy blue, high-necked dress, looking pinched. Her gray hair had been pulled so tight into a top knot that her eyes squinted. Mike wondered if it hurt. "Stand straight and don't fidget," she said. "Mr. and Mrs. Rutledge will be in here shortly. They're the last appointment of the day. Don't speak unless you're spoken to, and try to look pleasant. They want 2 boys, which, as you know, doesn't happen very often." Mike's heart pounded. They wanted 2? He looked at Frankie, who smiled up at him. Mike wiped a smudge from Frankie's cheek. The kid's pants were torn and he had no socks. Mike's shirt was stained and threadbare. The clothes Granny had sent with them, that she'd washed and pressed and carefully folded, had disappeared into the general laundry at Bishop's, which left everything the same dingy gray. "Do I look all right?" asked Frankie. "Mouse told me the more raggedy you look, the more likely you're to be fostered, 'cause people feel sorry," whispered Mike. If that was the case, he and Frankie were on their way out of Bishop's. The door opened and a couple stepped into the room. The man wore coveralls and a blue work shirt. He held a wide-brimmed hat in his hand. Farmers. But Mike wouldn't mind the labor as long as they were kind. The woman, her hands in white gloves and a pocketbook in the crook of her arm, fidgeted with the buttons on her calico shirtwaist. "Mr. and Mrs. Rutledge," said Pennyweather, smiling. "Welcome to the Bishop's home for—" "Them the boys?" interrupted the man. "Yes, Michael and Franklin Flannery." "I know I mentioned I needed 2, but I stopped at the state home on the way here and got me a couple strapping boys can work a farm. Grown men want a paycheck, and all I got to offer is room and board. Hard times, you know. Still, Mother here has her heart set on a youngster for the house, so I agreed." The woman stepped forward. "Feeding the chickens and pulling weeds, fetch and carry." The man walked over to Frankie and squished his upper arm as if to check his muscle. "He seems kind of puny." Frankie jerked away. "Oh, I assure you, Mr. Rutledge, he's stronger than he looks," said Pennyweather. "And if you would like another the same age as Franklin, you can have both for the same arrangement we discussed on the phone earlier." "Now that's a deal. That okay with you, Mother?" The woman shrugged. Sometimes 2 is easier than 1, just like puppies. Mike's heart pounded. They were going to take 2 lowers and not him? He put an arm around Frankie. We're brothers. We stay together. The man rubbed his chin and studied Mike. You got any special skills? Roofing? Fencing? Driving a tractor? Mike stammered. I play the piano. That doesn't do me no good. Nah, I already got me the 2 plowboys. Just the younger boys will do. Pennyweather walked toward Mike and glared. This is a good opportunity for Franklin. Okay, I want to stop right there for just a moment because in your questions it says, at what point do you realize that the fostering family doesn't care about loving and raising Mike and Frankie? What do they want? So where do we see that? Where did we see that here? How can we tell they're not just wanting some kids to love or wanting to help somebody? We see it in their talk about, like, what can you do, right? We want someone around the house to help. I already stopped at the state home and got boys that could pull the plow. So they're looking for, and the dad even says that getting boys from the home is cheaper than hiring labor. So those are our clues that they're not just wanting to rescue boys to love them, that they're wanting kind of free labor here. All right, now, here's Frankie's reaction. No, screamed Frankie, hugging Mike's leg. There now, said the man, we'll have none of that. He reached out and grabbed Frankie's arm. Mike shoved the man. Leave my brother alone. Mr. Rutledge stumbled backward. Now, just a minute here. You keep your hands to yourself. Frankie lunged toward the man, grabbed his hand, pulled it to his mouth, and bit. Ah! He yelled. Pennyweather reached for Frankie and missed. Franklin! He darted behind Mike. He's bleeding, cried the woman. Blood dots beaded up on the man's hand. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and bandaged it. Frankie scrambled into Mike's arms, wrapping his legs around him and burying his face in his neck. It's no use, mister, said Mike, hugging Frankie to him. First chance he'll run away. He's no good to you without me. In all my days I never seen such a thing, said the man. He turned to Pennyweather. What are you raising here? Animals? Come on, mother. He held the door for his wife, gave the boys a disgusted look, and slammed the door behind him. Mike put Frankie down and looked at Pennyweather. Her face was anger-stricken. Her eyebrows nearly touched her hairline. She marched across the room, opened the door, and pointed to Frankie. Wait outside. Okay, let's look at the next question. How has Frankie made sure he isn't separated from Mike? That's an interesting way to put it. How has Frankie made sure he isn't separated from Mike? So what did Frankie do to make sure that he stays with him? He was violent, right? He bit the man, and he was refusing in his own way. So he was making sure that he wasn't going to be separated by acting out. After slamming the door, she whipped around to confront Mike. He felt his face grow warm and knew it would be pink and splotchy in seconds. At the slightest feelings of embarrassment or blame or anger, he lit up like a thermometer sensing a high fever. Granny had always said it was a consequence of being red-haired and fair-skinned. Yep, she's right, because I do the same thing. Your brother has been called up twice since you've been here. The first time, he spat on a woman's baby, and now this. There are places much worse than Bishop's for wild boys like him. Mike talked fast. He didn't mean it. He only acts out because he wants to stay with me. He gets along good with all the other boys. As long as we're together, he's just fine. Pennyweather crossed her arms. It's hard enough to get people to take one child, let alone 2. Mike stood as tall as he could, his eyes pleading. You promised our grandmother. I promised her I'd try to keep you together. It was by no means binding. Pennyweather's anger stayed in her eyes, but her face changed and she smiled. It won't make a bit of difference soon. Hathaway House in Montgomery County is filled to overflowing with boys over 14. They are making it worth my while to create room for them here. Any of the lowers left by September will go to the state home to free up beds for the Hathaway boys. Mike felt as if someone had jerked a rug out from under him and he might topple at any minute. He steadied himself on the table. Then I'll go with Frankie. Not if I put you out to hire. It's not legal till I'm 14. I'm not even 12 for another 6 months. Pennyweather shook her head. Who's going to believe you're not 14, tall as you are? All I have to say is you came with no birth certificate. It happens all the time. You could be on a farm 50 miles away in another county. You better hope a family comes along for Franklin before September, and he behaves enough for them to want him, or he'll be in the state home and you'll be working who knows where. You two can mull that over long and hard in the cellar. Since the day they'd arrived, Mike had worried about what might happen if he and Frankie were separated. It was a dark cloud on the horizon of his mind, always looming, always menacing. He'd thought he had time to figure things out. Now, instead of 2.5 years away, the storm was overhead. Okay, this is your last question. The storm was overhead. What storm does Mike realize is coming sooner than he thought? And why is it coming sooner? Okay, what storm is coming? These are all really good. This writer is very good because she uses metaphors here. It's a storm is overhead. Is there literally a storm over his head? No, it's the idea that something is coming. A storm builds and moves. And something is building and moving towards him that he has known was coming. What was it? He has known, he has been afraid that the day when they would be separated is coming, right? So that's the storm. And why is it coming sooner? Did you catch it? That she's pushing the younger boys out and bringing older boys in. So they are going to be separated soon. And so she's telling him this so that he will basically force Frankie to take a good opportunity when it comes to him. Okay, I want you to think about that phrase, the storm is overhead. Can you think of another character, any character in any book that we have read so far? Or anyone that you've read, if you can give us a little bit of background, where a character has felt like a storm was coming or a storm was overhead. Similar to where, and this happens in every book, you could probably trace it to where the character feels like something is coming towards him, something bad, some bad news, some bad situation, some whatever. So I want you to think of the books we've read specifically. Name a character and what might their storm be. Okay? Ready?